Hello everyone, my name is Ashish and you are watching another web guy YouTube channel. So today we are going to start a new series in which we'll learn how to code in React by making projects. As you all know, making projects is the best way to learn something new. So today we are going to build a simple counter application. Although the application is very simple, but it uses some of the core concepts of React like props and states, and I'll explain those things in great detail. In this project, we will see how to set conditional styles like this one. You can see on the screen how the display area turns green for the positive number and it turns red for the negative numbers and it's gray for the 0. So I'll teach you this, and I'll also teach you how to think in React. That means how to think in terms of components and the states and the mindset shift which is required to code in React. As we move further in the series, in the subsequent videos, we will gradually increase the complexity level of the projects, and it will definitely help you to get better with React coding. So without wasting any time, let's get started.
If you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell icon so that you don't miss any of our videos.
Now you can see here, as usual, I'm using my VS Code text editor and I'm using my Chrome browser. Now React uses a lot of stuff under the hood and you can set up a React project in many ways. However, what we are going to learn is the most common and widely used method, that is by using Create React App. So Create React App is the officially supported way to create applications using React.js, and it does all the hard work for us, and we can set up a modern application just by using a single command. So if you are in VS Code, you can open the terminal by pressing Ctrl plus backtick, and inside this you have to write npx create react app and then the name of the application. So here I'm going to say counter tutorial. It will take some time to get ready, and you should know that to use this npx command, you should have Node installed in your computer. So if Node is not installed in your computer, you can go to nodejs.org, and from here you can download the latest version depending on your operating system. So you should have this downloaded, and then you can run this npx create react app command. So it will set everything up for you. If everything goes well, you should see here that we suggest that you begin by typing cd counter tutorial npm start. The React application is now ready. Let's do what it says. So we'll say cd counter tutorial. So basically we are going into our application folder, and here we'll say npm start to start our local server, and you will come onto this screen. So as you can see, we have already got a React application made for us. This is the power of Create React App. It does all the hard work, it does all the setting up for you and gives the template to create the React application, and you can just focus on your React code without worrying about setting up everything. So let's see our folder structure. Here's the counter tutorial folder. This is our React application. This is the node modules, which are the dependencies which we'll be using in our React application. You don't need to worry about all these things. Everything has been done by Create React App, and I'm not going into details and I'm not going to confuse you with that. I'll just tell you the essentials, what you need to know. So the folder which we are concerned is the src folder. So inside the src folder, the JavaScript entry point, the first thing which our React application sees is this index.js. So if you go into index.js, you can see that we are importing React from the React library. We are also importing React DOM and from the React DOM, and we are importing app from app. This is the app.js file, and the React DOM which we are importing from the React DOM library gives us a render function which allows the app component to render onto the screen. So whatever you can see here, it should be in the app.js file, and this document.getElementById root, that means you can comprehend that there must be a element with the ID of root, and it is targeting that div to render the app component. Let's see where this element is. So we can go to the public folder, and here in the index.html, here you can see we have a div with the ID of root. So basically it is targeting this div to render out our component. Now what is component? We'll go into that in a moment. For now, just understand that this app.js is something known as component, and it is getting rendered in this div having this ID of root. So in this index.js file, you can also change your things like your title and other metadata. However, you don't need to worry about that for now. In this tutorial, we are going to focus on core concepts of React. So let's come on to that. So inside this src folder, let's come on to the app.js file. Here you can say, again, we are importing React from the React library, and this statement gives us the superpower to code in React. So due to this statement, everything inside this is working. Let me just remove everything from inside. And we have this return statement. So inside the return statement, we have to return a JSX element. We'll come on to what is JSX in a moment. For now, let's create a div. We are not using this logo now, so we can just remove this import statement, and we can delete this logo.svg file. Then we can also delete this app.css. We can delete this index.css, delete this, and delete this. So after we have deleted everything, even we do not require this service worker.js, but however, I'm just keeping it for now. Don't worry about that. So we have this app.js file and we have this index.js file, and you can see we can remove this import statement because we do not have index.css. Now inside this app.js we do not have this as well, so we'll remove this. And now you can see a blank screen. So now let's go to our return statement, and here let's write a h1 element. So I'll say h1 and I'll say hello React. And you can see hello React here. So we have created our React application, and it is as simple as that by using create React application. Now there are a lot of things which are happening under the hood to get everything set up. However, our create React app has taken care of everything, and we can now just focus on the React code. So let's come on to this app.js file now. So let's go over it line by line. Firstly, it's importing React from the React library. So this React allows us to write the React code inside this app component, and then we have a function with the same name as that of the component. So we have app.js, and then we have the function app. We can also use an arrow function like this. So we can say const app is equal to, and then we can have an arrow, and inside this we have a return statement which returns something like HTML. However, this is not HTML, guys. This looks like HTML, but this is JSX, that is JavaScript XML. So what JSX does, it allows us to write HTML like code inside of JavaScript. So this is a JavaScript file, and we are writing HTML inside it that is provided to us by JSX, and we are being able to use JSX because of React. So it is not necessary to use JSX here, but it makes the development so much easier, and we can visually see the things in terms of the HTML elements, and we can edit them, and it is very easy and very powerful. Finally, we are exporting the app function so that we can use it in other files as well. I'll tell you what this means, but for now let's see the details of JSX. Whenever you write JSX, you have to follow some rules. The first thing while writing JSX is that there should be only one top level element. What this means is that you cannot have a div side by side like this. it will give you an error. So you can only have one top level element and everything should be wrapped inside it. Now the next thing is that every HTML element must be properly closed. So even if you have self-closing elements, for example, you have a BR tag. So if you have like BR like this, so you have to close it properly. If you write like this, you will get an error. So you have to either close by adding a proper closing tag, or you can close it like this by just adding a backslash for self-closing elements. Then if you want to write JavaScript inside of JSX, you can use curly braces. So whatever you write inside of curly braces will be evaluated as regular JavaScript. So for example, here if I write 2 + 2, it will be evaluated as 4, which is the regular JavaScript. So whatever you write inside this will be considered as regular JavaScript. Now you can also store JSX in variables. So for example, here we have this function, and remember guys, this is a regular JavaScript function, so we can do everything with that what we can do in normal JavaScript. So inside this we can declare a constant, and suppose I say para, and we can set its value equal to, and then we'll start a parenthesis, and inside this we'll write, for example, a paragraph element, and we'll say this is a paragraph. And now you can use this constant inside of our JSX by using the curly braces. So inside the curly braces, as I told you, everything will be evaluated as normal JavaScript. So we can insert our constant, and you can see on the browser that this is a paragraph is being rendered. So that was all about JSX. The next core concept of React is components. So whenever we code in React, we have to think in terms of components. And what are components? Components are nothing but the building blocks of any website or application. Let me show you visually. So if I go on to the React application which we have made already, so in this you can see that this is a component. Here this is a component, this is a component, and this is a component. So basically this counter application uses 4 components. 3 are the button components, and there's one more display component, and we are going to create these components in this tutorial. So just remember that whenever you see a React application, you should be able to break it down component by component, and then you have to code these components individually and then assemble them together to form the complete application. So now let's go back to our React app, and here let's create our first component. To create our component, you have to go to the src folder, and inside this we'll create a new file, and we'll say button. We are going to create the button component, so we'll say button.js. Now remember guys, whenever you are creating a component, the component name should start with an uppercase letter. So you can see here the B is capital in the button. Now in the component, you should always import the React from React library. So we'll say import React from React. This should be the first statement always. After that, we have to create a function with the same name as that of the component. So we'll say const button. I'm creating an arrow function, and this function should always return some JSX. So we'll say return, and here inside this we'll write some JSX. For now, let's create a div. And now after that, we have to export this function so that we can use it in other files. So we'll say export default, and we'll say button. And that's how you create a component. So let's add some text to it. So for example, I'll create a p tag, and I'll say this is a button. Now to use this button component, let's go back to our app.js file. Here we have to import the button function, or the button component to be precise. So we'll import button from, and here we have to specify the path of our button.js file. So since it is in the same folder, so we can say /, and we can write button without .js extension. We are able to do this due to the Create React app. It has already set up everything under the hood, and that's why we do not need to use this .js extension that is being taken care of by something known as Webpack, which is set up under the hood by Create React application. So we'll just import it like this. Now to use this component, we can create an HTML tag, and here we'll name it button, and we'll close it by using \, and that is how you use a component in React. You can see that we can see the text on the browser. The power of component is that we can use it many times, so we can just replicate it many times, and you can see that every time the same text would be rendered onto the browser. So this is the power of components. You can code once and you can use it anywhere in your application. So if you see our counter application which we have to build, we have 3 button components. So now let's create an actual button here. We'll keep it 3 times. And here we'll go to our button.js file, and inside this we'll create a button element, and we'll say some text here. We will change this text later, but for now we'll just create this some text. We do not need to use this div here because we just have one element. So even if I remove this div, it will not give me an error because we only have one top level element. That is the requirement for JSX. But for the sake of uniformity and simplicity, we'll keep this div so that you remember that you have to wrap everything around a div whenever you are returning some JSX. Now we also need to have one more component, that is the display component to display our text. So let's create that now. So we'll go back to our src folder, and here we'll create another file, and we'll say display.js. Inside this again we'll write import react from react. Then we'll make a function with the same name as that of our component. Remember that the component name should start with an uppercase. We are creating an arrow function. This should return some JSX. So we'll create a return statement, and here we'll create a div. And finally, we will export this display component. So we'll say export default display. Now here we can again create a p element, and we'll say this is the display component. Now to use this display component, we can go back to our app.js file, and here we'll create an import statement, and we'll import the display component from display without the JS extension, of course. And inside this return statement, we will create another HTML like tag for the display component, and you can see that our display component is being rendered on the screen. So now, as you can see, we have created the 3 button components and we have our display component, but we have an issue though here. As you can see in our counter application, that although there are 3 button components, but they have different text. But in our application, all of the buttons have the same text. This is where props come into play. So props are another core concept of React, and they are like function arguments. So basically props are component arguments. You can pass props from one component to another, and they allow component communication. We'll see that in action. So just understand that props are like function arguments. The way you pass arguments inside a function, in the similar manner you can pass props inside a component. Now the props are created like HTML attributes. So you can see that this component here looks like an HTML tag. So we can create props like an attribute. For example, here we can say text is equal to, and we can say, for example, plus here. So we have created a prop named text, and you can name it whatever you want. Now let's see this props. We'll go to our button.js file, and here inside this button function we'll receive the props here. So we'll say props. You can name it whatever you want. Now let's log this onto the console and see what we have. If I open the developer tools in Chrome browser, you can see that we have got three objects, and inside first object we have a text property, and these two objects are empty because in our app.js we are only passing the text prop in the first component and rest of the two components are empty. So we can use this test property or the test prop in the other two components as well. And now you can see that we are passing three objects. Each of the object has text property, and the text property is being passed from here. So if I show you visually, this is the text property. It is getting passed to our button component, and inside the button component it is getting received here, and this prop has the text property. So we can access the text passed by using prop.text, and you can see that we have got plus, minus and reset. Now to use that inside this, I have already told you that we can use curly braces to render JavaScript whenever we want. So we will remove this some text from here. Instead we will use curly braces, and inside this we'll say props.text. And you can see now we have got three buttons with plus, minus and reset. Now a more elegant way to do that is by using object destructuring. As you know that props is an object, so we can remove this and we can use the object destructuring syntax, and here we can say text, that is the name of our property, and inside this we can just use now text to use this. Here also we'll remove props dot, and you can see that the output remains the same. So we are using the text property outside of this object. If you're not clear about object destructuring, you can see my post on object destructuring. The link will be available in the I button. So we have created the component, we have learned about props, and we have learned how to pass props. After that, the next thing is we need a variable to store the value of the counter. So as you can see here, we have this variable which is being changed whenever we press these buttons. To make a variable in React, we use something known as states. So let's go back to our app.js file. If it would have been normal JavaScript or vanilla JavaScript, you would have done let counter is equal to 0, and then you would have run some logic of clicking the button and you would have said counter plus plus, something like this. But we do not do this in React. We cannot change the variables like this in React. To change these variables, we need to use something known as states. So basically states can be thought analogous to what are variables in regular JavaScript. So we'll learn how to create and use states, and it will be more clear by the example. So for that you need to import useState from React library. So useState is a hook or a function which allows you to use states in React. The way we write is we'll declare a constant. So for example, I'll say constant counter is equal to, and we'll set its value equal to useState function. And inside this parenthesis, the argument it takes is the initial value of the counter variable. So basically we need to initialize the counter variable. So here we can say 0. Now this useState function returns an array with exactly 2 elements. So this useState returns an array with exactly 2 elements. The first one is the state variable. So this is the state variable, and the second one is the function to update the state variable. So as I told you, you cannot update the variable just like that in React. You need to use this useState hook, and this useState hook gives us a function to update this variable. So let's see what I mean by that. So here we will first log this counter constant onto the console. So you can see that we are getting an array with exactly 2 elements. Now, if you are wondering why it is getting rendered 2 times, then it has something to do with this strict mode. So don't worry about that. You can remove the strict mode if you want for now, because right now we are not concerned about this, and you can see it will be only displayed once. But however, if you are making a actual application, then you should not remove the strict mode. Now we'll go back to app.js, and inside this you can see that we have got an array with exactly 2 elements. The first one is our state variable and the second one is a function. So now you can see that this 0 is coming from here. So basically this 0 is this. So if I change this to 1, you can see that our state variable will be initialized with 1. So let's set it back to 0. Now to use the state variable, we can either use the index. So for example, we can say counter 0, and you can see 0 being displayed here, or we can use array destructuring. So the way it works is you have to create square brackets, and then we can pull out the values from inside of useState. So as we know that useState returns one array with exactly 2 elements, so we'll create 2 elements here. First will be counter and the second one will be set counter, and you can name it whatever you want. However, the convention is that you should name your state variable the way you want, and you should name the function with a set in front of it and then the state variable. This makes amply clear that we are using this set counter function to update this counter variable. So we can recapitulate again. This useState is a function or a hook provided by React to set state inside of a React component. It returns an array with exactly 2 elements. The first one is the state variable and the second one is the function to update the state variable, and this variable is initialized by the argument which is being passed inside the useState hook. So here we are creating a counter variable and a set counter function to update this counter variable. Guys, the state is a very important concept in React and it is not very intuitive, and the concept of state will come to you once you keep on practicing and you'll keep on creating more and more applications. You will eventually learn what states are, but the better you understand the working of states, the good for you as a React developer. So now, once we have created our state variable, we need a way to update this state variable when we press our button. For that, we need to pass this state variable to the button component. We learned how to do that. We can create a prop, say counter, and again you can name it whatever you want, and then we will write curly braces. As you know, we can write JavaScript inside the curly braces. So here we'll say counter, and we'll create another prop, set counter, and we'll set its value equal to our set counter function. What wrong did, oh, I'm sorry, this backslash should be at the end. So you can see that this counter variable or this counter state variable is this one, and this state counter is this one, and you can name these props whatever you want. So you can name this counter and set counter whatever you want. However, I am naming it same as that of the state variable so that the code is more readable. You can name it whatever you want. Now let's copy this and we'll paste it here in all of our buttons. Now what we are going to do, we have sent these props to our button component. So let's receive this in our button.js file. So here we are pulling out text. We can also pull out counter, and we can put out set counter. As you must have guessed, we are going to use JavaScript events, but there's a slight difference in the way events are used in JSX or in React. If it would have been normal HTML, we would have written on click like this, but in JSX we have to use camel case, so we have to use on click with a capital C, and here we have to reference to a function, say counter handler. Now again, you can name it whatever you want, but the convention is you have to name the variable which you are going to change with this function and then a handler at the end, so that you know that this function is going to change the state variable. Now let's make this counter handler function. So we can remove this console.log statement, and now here we'll say const counter handler. We are creating an arrow function, and inside this we can say set counter plus 1. So now if you click on this button, we'll just log the counter on the screen. So we'll say console.log, and here we'll say counter. So now if we click on this button, you can see that the state variable is getting updated. Now where is this undefined coming from? Let me just check. Okay, this counter 0 is obviously undefined, so we'll remove this. Yeah, and now you can see that whenever you click any of these buttons, of course, the counter variable is getting updated. Now we do not want to do that. We want that whenever we click on this minus button, the value of the counter should decrease, and whenever we click on the reset button, the value of the counter should be set back to 0. Now, can you do that on your own? Pause the video and try to do this on your own. It is easy, guys. So I hope you must have figured it out that we can use this text property here to conditionally change the value of the counter. So here inside the counter handler, we can create a switch statement, and we'll say switch, and then we'll say text, and inside this we'll say case plus. So if the text is plus, what we have to do is say counter is counter plus 1, and we can create a break statement here. Similarly, we'll say if case minus, then we'll say counter, set counter, counter -1, break, and then if it is reset, we can set the counter to 0 like this. Let's also create a default statement. However, you should never reach here. So let's create the default statement and we'll say that you shouldn't be here. And that's it. Now if you click on these buttons, you can see that if I click on the plus button, the value of the counter is increasing. If I click on the minus button, the value of the counter has decreased. And if I click on the reset button, the value of the counter is now 0. So you can already see that we have our application working. Now the issue is we want to display the state variable onto our browser. How can we do that? We have already learned that we can use props to handle component communication. So again, first let's remove this console.log from here. Now we'll go onto our app.js file. Here we have this counter variable. We can pass this inside of the display component. So we can pass this counter prop inside the display. And this time I'm going to name this prop different from counter. So we can say display text is equal to counter. We are passing it like this because so that you know that it is not necessary to name it exactly the same as that of the state variable. You can name it whatever you want. So here you can name it counter as well, and you can name it something else as well. But the important thing is that this display text will be passed into our display.js file. So when we receive this display text here, we can use object destructuring, and here we have to specify display text only. And now this display text can be displayed here inside of the p element. So we can say display text like this, and you can see we have our working counter application. Whenever we click on the plus button, the value of the counter is increasing. Whenever we click on the minus button, the value of the counter is decreasing, and if you click on the reset button, the value of the counter is now 0. Now before we move ahead and style these buttons and our application, let's quickly recapitulate everything. First, we use the CRA or the Create React App tool to set up our basic project. After that, we cleaned up our SRC folder, and then we learned about JSX. After that, we created the button component and the display component. Then we learned about props and component communication, and we learned how to send props. After that, we learned what are states and how we can create these variables or state variables inside of React using useState, and how we can have a function named set that state variable to change the value. We passed that as a prop to the component where we required it, and inside the component we changed the state conditionally based on the buttons we pressed using the text property. After that, finally, we also passed this state variable to the display component, and we rendered it onto the screen through the display component. So that's all what we have done till now. Now let's move on to styling the components. Now in React, you can style the components in two ways. You can either use the JavaScript object, or you can use an external .css file. So first, let's see how we can do it internally through JavaScript object. So for that, what we can do is we can make a JavaScript object, say const display style. You can of course name it whatever you want, and we'll create it an object. And inside this, we will create CSS properties, but the name of the properties will be in JavaScript. So for example, if we want to use background color, we cannot use it like this. We have to use it in camel case, the way we use in JavaScript, right? I hope you already know this. So let's create some styles. I'm going to copy and paste it. So as you can see, I have just copied and pasted some styles. I've set the margin, some border, background color, padding, font size, min width, text align, and the color. Now to use this display style, we can add a style property here. So style is provided by React or JSX to style our elements. So inside here, we can set the value of style to this display style constant. So for that, if you want to insert JavaScript in JSX, you have to use curly braces. So we'll start curly braces, and inside this we'll write display text. Display style. Like this. And you can see that our display component is now styled. I don't know why I have used this capital syntax. We can make it small. It doesn't matter, guys. You can name it whatever you want. However, the convention is to name it in camel case. So that's why I'm using camel case. So this is how you do inline styling. You can create a style object, and you can use a style attribute to set the styling. Now let's see how you can use the external CSS file. We will style our button component using an external CSS file. For that, we'll create another file inside of our src folder, and we'll name it button.css. Now remember that this button.css is in global scope. That means it can be accessed from anywhere inside of our application. So it is really easy to mess up our styles. So to take care of that, what we do is first we name the file as the same name as that of the component, so that we know which component it is styling. And we take one more precaution, and what we do is we can add a class to this div. So we'll say class name. To add a class in JSX, we have to use class name and not just class, because class is already a reserved keyword in JavaScript. So for setting the class, we have to use class name. We can set its value equal to button. We set the class name same as that of the component, so that we do not mess up with our styles, and every component has their individual styles. So we can now use this button component, and if you want to add a style to this button element, you can use class name is equal to, now we'll use this button, and we'll do dash, and then we can do something else. For example, main. So we'll always have this component name at the beginning, so that we do not mess our styles. Now inside this button.css, we'll target our button main element, that is our button element. I'm sorry, there should be dot here. And here I'm going to copy and paste some styles. Nothing fancy, some basic styling. We have set the margin, border, background color, and the text color, font size, padding, and text align. Now, the one last thing which we need to do is we need to import this CSS file into our JavaScript file. Now, if you are wondering how can we import this CSS file into our JavaScript file, that is what is being taken care of by Webpack, and which is already set up by using Create React App. So when we use Create React App, it has set everything for us, and that's why we are able to import this button.css file. However, we are not seeing the styles getting applied. The reason for that is, I'm sorry, this should be capital. And you can see that we have our styles applied to the button. Now, before we see how to conditionally change these styles, for example, if we want to click, if the value of the counter is positive, we want to show some other color, and if the value is negative, we want to show some other color. We'll do that in the end of the video. Before that, let's see the folder structure we can follow while creating React app. Now, everyone has their different style of creating folders. I'm going to show you what I usually follow. So inside of the src folder, we can create a folder named components. And inside the components folder, we'll create another folder named button. And inside of this button folder, we can keep this button.js and button.css file. Again, we will also create another folder inside of our components folder, and we'll name it display. And here we'll keep this display.js file inside of this display folder. And VS Code is automatically detecting these file changes and it is amending the import statement. However, in your case, you may need to change it manually. So take care of that. Whenever you change your file structure or your folder structure, you need to adjust your import statements as well. Now, let's create one more app.css file. Now, we'll import this app.css file here. And we'll give it a bit of styling. We'll move this display component above. We'll create a class here. So we'll say class name app. And inside this, we can create .app. So we'll say .app to target the app component, and we'll paste these styles. We can remove this hello React from here, and we can create another div, and let's name it, and let's give it a class of class app main, and we'll move all of this inside our app main div. Now we'll target this .app main, and we'll say display flex. Let's move it once more. And we get this kind of design. Now we want to conditionally render our CSS. For that, let's go to our display.js file. And here we can check this display text, and based on the value of the display text, we can change our style. Let's see how to do that. So for that, inside of our function, we'll create an if statement, and we'll say if display text is greater than 0. Then what we need to do that is, first let's change the type of this display style from constant to variable. And we can do that by using the let keyword. And inside here, we will say display text is equal to, and we'll create an object, and we'll use the spread operator to copy everything inside of display style. I'm sorry, it should be display style. So we'll use a spread operator to copy everything which is already there inside of display style. So we'll use 3 dots, and we'll say display style, and then we will change the background color property. We'll say background color to pink, or probably light green. Like this. Now whenever the value of our counter is positive, you can see that the color of this display component changes to light green. Now similarly we can create another statement. So we'll say else if display text is less than 0. In that case we can say display style equal to, again we'll copy everything from display style and we'll set the value of the background property to pink. And that's it. That's how we can conditionally change the styling of our components. You can see that whenever the number is positive, we have the green background color, and whenever the number is negative, we have the pink background color. I hope this video helps you to get started with React. You should have now some understanding of components, states, and props. Keep practicing, guys. The more you practice, the better you will get.
Please hit the like button if you learned something. If you're new here, consider subscribing. See you in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.